Yeah, so my name's Drew Baker. I'm here to talk about this, well, what I think was a really cool project that we've been doing for UCLA Library here in Los Angeles. Uh, Let me get into it. The point of what I'm trying to show here is like we trained a whole team on a new framework. So I think if you're working at a company or you're management at a company and you're considering going down a road like this is kind of how we did it. And hopefully you can learn some of the lessons that we learned. And if not, I'd love to hear how you've done it on your end as well. So this is me. Like David kind of gave you the overview before, but I'm the technical co-founder at Funkhouse. We do a lot of website design and development, but I spend most of my time in Nuxt and Vue. If there's some of you out there that might not know what Nuxt is, if you're in the React world and you know about Next, well, Nuxt is like that for Vue. And so that's what we do a lot of work at in the tech team at Funkhouse. So what happened? So UCLA library team, headed up by Josh Gomez, he had designed a website with an outside design partner and came to Funkhouse because they wanted to build that website internally at UCLA library, but they knew that they were going to have to maintain it and that they didn't know any of the front end frameworks. Like they were mostly sort of Rails, PHP, Ruby, Python sort of engineers over there, and like very talented engineers, but hadn't really done any of the sort of JavaScript heavy front end stuff. And so they came to Funkhouse and asked us, hey, can we teach them that while also helping them build the website kind of at the same time? And so that was the request. And so this is kind of how we did it. So we started at this spot. We had the completed designs by the design agency. We didn't have any mobile designs, and that's going to be an issue that comes up later. They knew that they wanted to use Nuxt, like that was a decision that was already made, and they were using Craft CMS for the headless backend. So that was just going to be outputting GraphQL that we would have to sort of ingest and deal with. So their team was like 6 full-time developers, but no one really like had done anything in JavaScript before. Like they have a Vue super fan on their team that comes to all the Vue js.la meetups and knows it really well, but had never sort of worked at it, certainly not at this level. And then they had a 1 day a week Vue consultant who was good and knew the whole thing. And then me and no in-house UI design people. So we were sort of having to make a lot of design decisions as developers. And so that's kind of where we started, and this is how we tackled it. So these are some designs just to show you what it kind of looked like. And this is still being built. So you'll see this hopefully before the end of the year. So just showing you like, there's a bit to it, kind of intricate layouts and overlays of things and lots of SVGs. And yeah, so it's a good design and complicated. So we had to figure out how to build this and teach the people that had never really, built anything in a JavaScript framework before, how to do something like this. So, good task. So how do we do it? So the trick with doing any of this kind of work is you really want to take something that's like big and complicated and break it down into small and easy parts and then tackle those. So with that sort of spirit, this is kind of how we did it. So the tech stack is Vue, Nuxt, obviously those kind of go together. Storybook, which we use for all of our component libraries. If you haven't used Storybook before, you should definitely check it out after this. It's fantastic for building components in isolation. And then we use GraphQL request for the fetch from the CMS to the front end. And then Craft is the back end, obviously. We use SCSS and then Prettier across the team for all of our linting. And there's some people out there in the audience that I know are big Tailwind fans, and that was something that we really thought long and hard about. Tailwind is a CSS sort of utility library that makes CSS really fast if you're familiar with CSS, but we were coming into it, pretty early with with CSS. So I didn't want to add an extra layer on the learning there. So we just kept it like vanilla CSS, but with SCSS for some organization that was really good. And then the whole thing was going to be static site generated on Netlify. So this website is a big website, and this is all that we built it with. So goes to show you don't need tons and tons of dependencies to get very far. So this was our process. So what I did was we nominated 2 of the developers that sort of had the most experience in the front end world as like our project leads. And then with the project, and everyone else was just going to focus on components. So the project leads became the people that were putting together the jigsaw, and then everyone else was just building the little pieces of the jigsaw in Storybook. And so it really allowed you to kind of like separate the knowledge that the project leads had to kind of know Nuxt more, and everyone else just had to know Vue. And so it made it really easy to just focus on building a component without having to have this broader knowledge of like data stores and fetching and everything. All they had to worry about was like props and events, and that was it. And then me and the project leads went through and figured out all of the components, just all the names of every component, the props of every component, and just wrote a big list. And then the project leads went out and spec'd out each component, like with screenshots and detailed descriptions of how it was all supposed to work. And is this prop an array or an object and all those kinds of things. And then the rest of the team could just go in and build, a component based on that spec. And it really, really allowed them to kind of go faster and isolate what it is they had to know. And we did this all in GitHub, and each component spec was just an issue in GitHub that they could PR against. And so it worked really, really well like that. And we could get code reviews and all of that kind of stuff through GitHub. We didn't need anything else. And it's worked really well. We mocked up all the data because we didn't have a backend when we started, and we're like 2 months into this now and we still don't have a backend. So we've been using a lot of mock data, and we just did that in a big JSON file with some sort of expected structures, and used that in Storybook, and that works good too. Yeah, and then once we kind of figured out all of the onboarding sort of breaking down of components and everything, it just became a lot of paired programming. And when I say paired, I really mean it was like me and like 5 other people, and we'd all sort of watch as I like code reviewed each one. So I'm sort of teaching them how to do code reviews of these sorts of components and Storybook and everything at the same time. And that's kind of the process we took. And then as we kind of started finishing off all the components, the project leads would start assembling them into the pages. And so we tried to prioritize which components we built so that like the homepage and all the homepage components would be built. And then they could assemble the homepage while we moved on to like the events page. And that's worked really, really good because, as they've built the homepage from pre-existing components, they've learned like, oh, okay, we need to adjust these ones, for the next round of components that we go in and doing, which would have been a problem if we just built all of them at once and then realized like, we could have probably done things differently. And so building them sort of in phases has worked out really well. So how did it go? So the original sort of engagement for me was to go 2 times a week, helping them, doing like training sessions and all of this stuff, for 2 months. After the first month, what's up, David? You just said something. I got interrupted there. Sorry. So after the first month, we were like way behind schedule, and it was because it was just taking so long for the UCLA team to kind of like digest everything, and then they would get pulled off into all these different directions on different projects, which we're going to get to in a second. So we changed my schedule to go 1 day a week. So if you're looking to bring in sort of an outside consultant to help your team, I think 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week in the first month kind of was good to ramp everything up. But after that, 1 day a week is pretty good. It gives the team a good pace, and they can really kind of get work done before I show up and then like tear it all down with code reviews. So these were our major milestones that we were trying to operate against. And this just gives you an idea of the kind of pace that we went at. So, you can kind of see it all there. And then we adjusted to 1 day a week on the right-hand side of the screen there. And we're at, we just did week 8 today, actually. And we started finally connecting in all the API data and stuff like that. So that's where we're at. So it was definitely slower. These are my sort of lessons here. It was definitely slower than I expected. The UCLA team has 72 projects under development. Like it's a $7 billion school. Like it's a big, big business. And so they're doing a lot of different projects. So that kind of also made it hard to keep the team continuity together. Like when you get that many people and those many projects, someone's on vacation or someone's working on something else that's an emergency. And then so it's very hard to kind of keep everyone together. We managed to keep the project leads all the time. So the 2 sort of people that knew the project the best, they've been available all the time, but everyone else has sort of been drifting in and out, which actually kind of works when you do that component approach that I explained, because like you're not waiting on one person to like unlock something. They're working on one little component and you can skip that or mock it up if you need to. So that worked out okay. We've got through 35 components now. We probably actually maybe a little more because we did some today. That was kind of how many we got. So we've been, you can work backwards there. I've done 8 sessions and we've got 35 components. And there's about 100 or so left to go. We did lots of code pairing. I mean, that's worked out amazing. Both me with them and them together. There's no way around it, but it's good. I kind of encourage the code pairing stuff. It's a great way, obviously, to learn it. Everyone knows it, but shouldn't be putting pressure on yourself not to do that. Like, it helps. The thing I didn't really expect was CSS is so hard to learn. Like, if you don't know it, like, I'm sure there's a lot of us out here have just spent our whole lives in it and know it. But if you don't know it, it's not like other languages where you can learn a logic to how the decisions make and kind of guess how it's going to go down the road. CSS is sort of not like that. You kind of just have to know a lot of these properties and how they interact with each other and things like that. So that was something that I kind of underestimated. And I even went into it thinking that was going to be a challenge. And I definitely even still underestimated it. So that was something to keep in mind. Vue was really easy. Everyone picked up Vue really easy. I mean, it helps that they're all sort of great programmers in other languages. And so it sort of makes sense to them. But Vue was very easy for them to learn. Like, definitely don't be intimidated by that. We were using Nuxt, as it is now, is still Vue 2. So Vue 3 has come out recently, and that's definitely more like React in some of the syntax. But Nuxt is still in Vue 2 world. So we've been doing it all in Vue 2. Yeah, and the backend is still not finished, which is something that was supposed to be sort of done when we started. So don't make assumptions on that. And then linting across all the different IDEs that everyone was using was painful in the beginning. Just trying to kind of get everyone's linting process to sort of equal the same thing just was tedious, and I didn't sort of pay enough attention to that in the beginning because I was trying to move on to actual coding. So those are the big lessons learned, on top of some of our results there. Was like, if we had a little more time in the beginning, I probably would have started everyone off on these online courses before I even got involved. And they did do some of them, but we should have sort of enforced it onto everyone because it could have just shortcutted a lot of the like basic stuff, I think. Especially the CSS stuff. I should have focused more on like just explaining how things like FlexGrid work and real early on. Like, they got the hang of it when we got into it, but I probably could have saved a little friction earlier on. And definitely more hands-on guidance with setting up IDEs and linting tools and things like that. And then this point here about trust no one is just like, you come into these projects and they always go, oh, the backend's going to be finished, or you're going to have full designs, or whatever promises that you were getting made from someone else, and then inevitably it doesn't work, and you have to just push through with it. You can't get roadblocked by those things. So just be ready going into it. Like, do not assume that someone outside of your team is going to, they're going to have their own things going on. So that was something. And a better mock data solution definitely would have helped. Like, this big JSON file that we made for all the mock data stuff, it works, but it's definitely clunky. And I would like to hear, afterwards in our Rambly chats here, what everyone else does for that, because it's definitely room for improvement in that space. So yeah, those are the big lessons that we learned, and hopefully shortcut some stuff for you guys. And that's the sort of the quick version of a few months of working on a really cool project with UCLA Library. So I hope that that helps you guys shortcut a few things when you're working on it. And thanks for having me.